There it was, my room, on someone else's network.
It was late spring, 2021. The world was still figuring out how to exist online, and I was obsessed with landing a stable work-from-home job that would finally let me move out of my parents' basement. I didn't realize it at the time, but the minute I signed that digital contract, I had already opened the door to someone watching my every move. They called me a content analyst for a mid-sized tech company out of Seattle. I lived 3 states away. The interviews were smooth, a little too polished, and the HR manager Diana kept repeating the same line about a professional static backdrop for video calls. Company aesthetic, consistency, smile that didn't reach your eyes. I told myself it was corporate theater. A week before day 1, a branded box hit my doorstep. Laptop, monitor, headset, and a bonus. A small, vintage-styled desk clock. Heavy mahogany, brass face, the company's dated logo pressed into the base like an afterthought. It came with a note stuck on the back. A complimentary piece to enhance your workspace aesthetics. Please position this directly behind you for all scheduled calls. I put it on the shelf behind my chair, centered dead in the camera's view. It ticked loud, too loud for its size, like it wanted to be the only sound in the room. The first weeks were the usual corporate haze. Modules, stand-ups, little squares of faces pretending not to be exhausted. I made one friend, Grace, quiet, sharp, the type who notices patterns before anyone else knows a pattern exists. "That clock is weird, Ryan," she messaged me. "Everyone has one. They call it the Sentinel." I joked back, "That's dramatic." She didn't laugh. "It's tied to a discontinued product line. Also, yours is dark mahogany. I've only seen that model with the original 2020 hires." She was tracking finishes, colors, versions. I ignored the chill I felt and filed the name away. Sentinel. Not friendly. Not cute. Watcher. My friend Liam came over that weekend. He's the skeptic in my life, the guy who deflates every anxious thought with a dumb joke and a colder fact. He tapped the clock like it might purr. "What is this? Time machine or a cop prop?" "Corporate decor," I said. "Uniform look." "Uniformly wrong," he said, pointing. "It says 3:45. It's 5:10. I tried to adjust the brass knob. Nothing. It wouldn't turn. Then I realized the tick wasn't coming from any real gear, just a cheap chime buried in the base. It wasn't a clock. It was a loud, fake shape of a clock. That night, I was working late. The room was dark except for my monitor. The tick-tick felt like it was crawling under my skin. I stood to turn the thing off, then froze. On the shelf, next to the clock, was a framed photo of me and Liam at a concert. Only now, the frame was facing backward. I'd set it forward that morning. I'm not the type to forget details in my own space. Windows locked, door bolted, no signs of a break-in. I turned it forward again and told myself I was tired. That was all. After that, the little things started stacking up, and each one fit neatly into the category of too small to bother anyone else with. A pen that had been lying horizontal was now vertical. A half-drunk water bottle sat capped. Things moved, shifted, corrected themselves. Nothing enough to prove anything. Everything enough to make me feel insane, I told Liam. He laughed it off. "You're in that room 12 hours a day. You're the ghost you're scared of." Then came the presentation, my first major one. Diana was on the call. A couple senior managers were in the gallery. Grace's square sat in the corner. I was 3 minutes in when Grace cut me off, soft, urgent. "Ryan, look at the shelf, next to the Sentinel." I didn't want to, but I did. The clock, the photo, and stuck to the glass of that photo so small I'd missed it was a yellow sticky note. "What about it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. It wasn't there when we started. As I stared at my own background in the little self-view box, a thin black line appeared on that sticky note. I thought my eyes were playing tricks. Then the line curved, stopped, continued. Someone was writing on it, in real time. Not hours ago right now. When the ink stopped moving, the word was clear, printed over my friend's face. Skeptic. Grace exhaled hard through her mic. Diana cleared her throat. "Ryan, ignore that and proceed." "Ignore what, exactly?" "The note itself. Or the part where a stranger just proved they were close enough to annotate my life while my camera was on? I ended the call. Power outage, I said. Bad connection. I didn't wait for permission. I grabbed the clock and slammed it down. The hollow chime inside died, like something small had just stopped breathing. The wood panel on the back wasn't glued. It was held on like it was meant to be removed if you knew it should be. I pried it off with a flathead. What I saw wasn't a clock. It wasn't a promo trinket. It was a machine pretending to be harmless. A lithium-ion cell, a slim green board, a pinhole lens the size of a freckle, and a SIM slot live data. Not Wi-Fi. Not something that drops when your internet does. Something designed to survive your router and keep reporting in. I pulled the SIM with shaking fingers. That tiny chip felt heavier than the whole frame, like a piece of my life had been shrunk into plastic and metal. My laptop pinged across the room. New notification. Your access privileges for all corporate platforms have been revoked. Please return all company property immediately. No meeting. No offboarding call. Just a clean, immediate cut. Then a second message slid over it in a plain, ugly overlay, not in any company font. It was never just the clock. The screen went black. My burner phone, one I only used for emergencies, buzzed. Grace. Ryan. Mine silver. Same back panel, same chip slot. I pulled it. I'm shaking. What does skeptic mean? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Whoever was watching had already labeled the roles in my life like file folders. I shoved the clock's guts, the SIM, the tools, and the phone into a backpack. I was leaving. Not just the room. This apartment. Not tonight. Not tomorrow. Now. I moved for the door. Then I saw it something so small, I almost missed it, and that's what made it worse. The key hook that had been mounted next to my door was gone, not ripped off, unscrewed. 2 clean holes remained. In its place, with a thin layer of industrial adhesive, was a cheap digital photo frame. It was looping a single image, me and Liam at that concert. The same shot I kept on my shelf, except this one included the sticky note. Skeptic. Same angle, same glare on the glass. Not a copy of the original picture, a shot of the frame in my apartment. Someone had stood in this exact spot, installed a screen, and loaded proof that they had been in my home, not long ago. Not once, often enough to be casual about it. I didn't touch it. I backed away, eyes on the spare room. 3rd floor, 1 big window, the only exit I could trust. I pressed my face to the glass and scanned the street. 3 cars. My sedan, the neighbor's pickup, and a dark blue sedan I didn't recognize, parked directly across the street, angled toward my building. Windows too dark, even for the hour. I told myself it was nothing. Then, under the streetlights, the back window gave itself away a tiny reflection, a clean circle of glass catching the light inside all that tint. A lens, a long one, pointed at my window. Inside surveillance. Outside surveillance. 2 nets tightening at the same time. Fight or flight doesn't ask for your permission. I grabbed a floor lamp by its iron base and drove it through the pane. The sound slammed through the room like a firearm, then turned into a rain of shards that glittered in my office light. I climbed onto the sill. Cold air hit me like the first honest thing that had touched me in weeks. I looked back once, only once, because sometimes you need to see the thing you're leaving to believe you're actually leaving it. The photo frame on my desk, the original, lay face down now. I hadn't touched it since turning it forward days ago. Someone had. And on the backing, in thick black marker, a message took up the entire surface in block letters you couldn't ignore even if you wanted to. We'll be watching your reflection from now on. No signature. No logo. No need. I went through that window like a diver, breaking the surface. I didn't care where I landed. I just needed to get out of the camera. I hit the flower bed below hard enough to see static. I rolled, got up, and ran for the alley. I didn't look at the blue sedan. I didn't look at my door. I didn't look back at the shattered window that used to be my office. The backpack thumped against my spine and reminded me that the only proof I had weighed less than a paperback and more than I could carry. I didn't call Grace. I didn't call anyone. You don't phone a friend from inside a trap. You change your definition of home to somewhere they haven't already memorized. And you keep moving. I didn't sleep for the first 40 hours after that. Not because I couldn't, but because sleep felt like permission, permission for whoever they were to catch up to me. I drifted from one cheap motel to another, always paying in cash, always checking for hidden lights behind mirrors, and listening for phantom ticks in the walls. The Sentinel sat inside my backpack, heavy and lifeless, but somehow louder in my head than when it worked. By the third night, paranoia stopped feeling like fear and started feeling like muscle memory. I taped over the peephole, unplugged the TV, and kept the clock next to the bed like a weapon. Every creak of the building made me imagine a lens adjusting somewhere in the dark. Grace was the only person I trusted enough to message. We met halfway at a small coffee shop that reeked of burnt espresso and quiet guilt. She looked like I felt, pale, underslept, and haunted by something she couldn't prove. She placed her own version of the clock on the table between us. Silver casing, same fake chime, same internal setup once you cracked it open. "They didn't come for me," she whispered. "No car outside my apartment, no new devices. Maybe they're done." I wanted to believe her, but her voice trembled when she said maybe. "I think they just needed one of us to break," I said. "You said you've seen the earlier models, the 2021s? She nodded slowly. "Yeah, the ones like yours. The mahogany. Do you know any of those people now?" Her eyes shifted away. "No, most of them just stopped logging in. Their accounts got deleted from Slack. Their names vanished from the employee list. I thought maybe layoffs." I stared at the clock. No one gets erased like that. Not unless someone needs them forgotten. She pushed her coffee aside and leaned in. "Ryan, what if it's not just spying? What if it's behavioral tracking, experimenting on remote employees, seeing how long it takes before paranoia eats productivity?" That theory should have sounded insane, but after everything, it sounded clean, almost comforting. An explanation meant there were rules, boundaries. We sat in silence. Then Grace reached for her bag and slid a small envelope across the table. "I found this in my apartment mail slot this morning," she said. "No return address." Inside was a glossy photo. Me standing in my broken office, staring at the shattered window. It had been taken from outside, through the lens of that blue sedan. "I didn't send this," she said. I believed her. The next few weeks blurred into survival. No job. No laptop. I worked odd gigs where cash didn't leave a digital trail warehouse, night shifts, landscaping, anything that kept my hands busy and my mind too tired to think. But even exhaustion can't kill paranoia. Everywhere I went, I noticed clocks. In diners, offices, waiting rooms. Always a model close enough to trigger that internal static. Mahogany, brass, chrome. Every tick felt personal. Every lens of every security camera looked too aware. Sometimes, I'd pull the Sentinel from my backpack and just stare at it, its hands frozen forever at 3:45. I'd trace the edge of the brass frame and think about how something so small had rewritten my understanding of privacy. It wasn't the hardware that scared me anymore, it was the design philosophy. Someone had built an object meant to be intimate, to blend into trust. One night, a storm rolled over the small town where I'd been staying. I was holed up in a roadside motel when the power flickered. My room went dark, except for the weak blue light of my prepaid phone. I turned the screen on and froze. A notification blinked. No app name, no number. Just text. "You're doing better without the clock." No sender ID. No metadata. Just that. I threw the phone in the sink and ran the tap until the screen cracked under the heat. It didn't stop the dread. Months passed. I moved again. And again. I learned to live like a ghost, never more than one night in the same town. But some habits survive relocation. I'd still find myself checking reflections in dark windows, making sure they didn't move differently than I did. Once, in a gas station restroom, I caught my reflection blinking half a second too late. I smashed the mirror before I could confirm what I'd seen. I don't tell people my real name anymore. There's no point. Whoever orchestrated the Sentinel experiment doesn't need names. They tag people by behavior, by fear response. Grace disappeared 2 months after our meeting. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her LinkedIn profile reappeared briefly with a new title, Remote Systems Analyst, Sentinel Dynamics. Then it vanished again. I think that's when I finally understood what the last message meant. We'll be watching your reflection from now on. Not metaphorical, literal. They didn't need my devices anymore. They had mapped my habits, my angles, my gaze. Any camera could find me if I looked into it long enough. That's the trick, isn't it? Once you've been seen, you start broadcasting yourself. Paranoia becomes participation. You double-check every reflection, every glass surface, every dark screen, and that's when they catch you again. Now, when I tell this story, I don't expect people to believe me. They nod, smile politely, assume trauma. That's fine. But sometimes right around 3:45 inches the morning, I hear a faint tick. Talk. Not from the backpack, not from any clock in the room. From the mirror. Like something on the other side is keeping time for me. I try not to look, because I know if I do, there'll be a note waiting on the glass. And I'm not ready to read what it says. The first time I set foot in that house, the air already felt wrong. Cold, still, like it was holding its breath. It was late November, about 5 years ago. I just wrapped up my final year of university and was drowning in bills, desperate for any job that would keep me afloat. So when I stumbled across a house-sitting gig that paid like I'd hit the jackpot, I didn't ask many questions. I should have. The couple's names were Mr. and Mrs. Albright. Rich, older, and supposedly spending 3 months sailing across the Mediterranean. All I had to do was live in their mansion, feed their 5 cats, and make sure the place stayed spotless. It was easy money. Their home was massive, a modernist maze of glass walls and white furniture, sitting inside a gated community an hour outside the city. It looked more like a museum than a place people actually lived. Every surface was polished. Every light was cold and deliberate. When I first met them, I thought they seemed kind, if a little strange. Mr. Albright was tall, quiet, with the kind of stare that felt rehearsed. He spoke carefully, like each sentence had already been written for him. Mrs. Albright was the opposite, anxious, fluttery, always over-explaining. She talked about her cats like they were her children. But there was one thing Mr. Albright said during our short interview that stuck with me. Complete and total respect for our privacy, Evan, especially the technology. Don't touch the main panel. Don't change the Wi-Fi. The security system is fully automated and connected to my phone. It's for insurance purposes. It sounded normal enough at the time. I nodded, signed the paperwork, and 2 days later, I was moving into what looked like the set of a luxury home commercial. For the first few days, it was peaceful. Quiet. Too quiet, maybe. The cats mostly ignored me except for mealtimes. I spent my nights watching movies in a massive living room that could have fit my entire apartment inside it. When my friend Maya video called to check in, she was practically jealous. A 3-month paid vacation in a mansion? Dude, that's insane, she said, laughing. It's a little too perfect, I told her. It feels like living inside a showroom. I keep waiting for one of these glass sculptures to explode if I breathe on it wrong. Everywhere I looked, the security system was there. Little white sensors in the corners, motion detectors, and dome cameras with blinking lights. They were visible, not hidden, which actually made me feel safer. Like if they were trying to spy on me, they wouldn't make the cameras so obvious, right? That's what I thought. The first strange thing happened about a week in. I was sitting in the library, this massive room with shelves that reached the ceiling. I'd just finished eating Italian takeout, a huge calzone I'd ordered through an app. I remember it clearly. I was halfway through a chapter of The Turn of the Screw when my phone buzzed. It was an email from Mr. Albright. Not his personal address, just a generic one with no profile picture. The subject line, a note. The body of the email had one sentence. The calzone was a poor choice, Evan. Too much ricotta. For a full 30 seconds, I just stared at my screen. My food containers were still open on the coffee table. I hadn't posted about it online, hadn't mentioned it to anyone, not even Maya. The only people who knew I had ordered calzone were me, the delivery guy, and the Albrights. I looked up at the corner of the room. There was a dome camera there. I'd seen it before, didn't think much of it. But the idea of them watching me eat in real time from somewhere across the world, that twisted my stomach. Still, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe they got a motion alert when the delivery guy showed up. Maybe they checked the footage and saw what I was eating. Rich people are weird, right? I deleted the email and told myself not to overthink it. The next night shattered that illusion. I had just taken a shower in the master bathroom. Massive glass walls, marble floors, one of those rainfall shower heads. I stepped out, towel around my waist, reached for my phone, and froze. There was a text from an unknown number. You missed a spot on your left shoulder. Try the exfoliating scrub under the sink. My blood went cold. I ran my hand over my shoulder, and sure enough, there was a patch of soap I hadn't rinsed off. My heart started pounding. I looked around the bathroom. No dome cameras, no sensors, just spotless glass, polished metal, and white tile. I tore through the place like a maniac, checked behind the mirror, inside the vent, along the trim of the shower. Nothing. The fear that came next was worse than any jump scare. It was calculated. I knew then that whoever was watching had gone beyond the visible cameras. The worst part was that the text didn't sound playful. It wasn't a prank. It sounded like a correction, like I had done something wrong under their direction. That's when I went looking for the main security panel. It was inside a closet near the laundry room, a complex matrix of wires and blinking lights. There was a small touchscreen interface that listed all camera locations. I clicked through each one. Library, kitchen, living room, bedroom. When I reached the bathroom, it was marked non-video zone. There were no cameras there, not officially, which meant there was a second system, something off record. At that point, I started searching everywhere, desperately. Every vent, every light fixture, every decoration. But then my eyes landed on something I'd walked past 100 times already, the cat condo. Mrs. Albright had made me promise to take care of their cats like family. They love company, she had said. They have favorite nap spots. It's all written down on the kitchen counter. The condo was massive. 5 tiers, mahogany and carpet, sitting near the master bedroom window. The 2 Abyssinians, Zeus and Hera, always lounged there. I walked closer, crouched beside the middle tier where they liked to sit. It was lined with velvet, stitched with little paw motifs, but one of the paw pads had thicker stitching than the rest. I pressed on it, solid, grabbed tweezers from my bag, started picking at the seam. The velvet peeled back to reveal a tiny plastic shell underneath. Inside it, perfectly centered, was a camera lens the size of a fingernail. It was angled toward the bathroom door. My mouth went dry. The thing was battery-powered, connected to Wi-Fi, the same network Mr. Albright had told me never to touch. The realization came in pieces, like cold air seeping through cracks in the wall. The cats weren't the reason for the cameras. I was. The Albrights hadn't hired a house sitter. They'd hired entertainment. I sat there for a long time, the cats rubbing against my legs, purring like nothing was wrong. But I could feel my pulse in my throat. I couldn't leave yet, not without knowing how deep this went. I had to see how many more eyes were hidden in that house. That night, I didn't sleep. I searched, and what I found made me wish I had never taken that job at all. By morning, I was running purely on adrenaline. Every sound in the house felt amplified, the creak of the hardwood, the hum of the fridge, even the cat's claws on the tile. Somewhere behind all of that, I could almost feel a silent heartbeat. The heartbeat of a network still watching me. I had found one hidden camera, and that was enough to destroy any sense of calm. So I kept searching. I dug out an old radio frequency detector from my tech junk box, one I'd used years ago for drone hobby work. It wasn't perfect, but it could pick up signals from transmitting devices. Within minutes, it started to buzz. The kitchen was the first hotspot. I followed the signal to a decorative fire extinguisher plaque on the wall. Behind it, tucked neatly inside, was another tiny camera, this one aimed directly at the dining table. The living room had one too. In a carved wooden wall relief above the fireplace, the eye of a deer held a lens. It pointed down toward the couch, where I usually sat with my laptop. And then the bedroom. The headboard, thick, padded velvet, hummed faintly when I ran the detector over it. I sliced the seam open with a box cutter, and there it was. Another lens, carefully centered, angled to catch the entire bed. By the time I was done, I'd found 8 cameras in total. Each one cleanly installed, each one running through that untouchable Wi-Fi network. And every one of them pointed at places where someone would live, not just pass through. The Albrights' insurance system wasn't protecting their home. It was protecting their investment. And their investment was me. By sunrise, my fear had curdled into anger. I couldn't just smash the cameras that would alert them immediately, and I had no idea how much they could see or hear in real time. So instead, I decided to set a trap. I went to the library, the same place where I'd gotten that first creepy email about the calzone, and positioned myself right in front of two cameras I now knew were active. I took a deep breath, picked up my phone, and called Maya. I spoke loudly, making sure my voice carried. "Maya, listen. Something happened. One of the cats, Zeus, is sick. Really bad. He's been vomiting all night. I'm taking him to the emergency vet. If the Albrights call, tell them I used my own money, okay?" I hung up and stared straight into the lens above the fireplace. Now I waited. Minutes crawled by. The cats played quietly in the corner, perfectly healthy. Then my phone buzzed. An email. Same blank, generic address. Subject, the cat, body. "Zeus is fine, Evan. He just finished his breakfast of steamed cod. We would prefer you not involve an outside veterinarian, as their records would interfere with our insurance policy." I dropped the phone. They'd seen through my lie within minutes. They weren't watching occasionally. They were watching now. Live. Constantly. And that last line about the insurance policy felt less like an excuse and more like a threat. I wasn't supposed to let anyone else into the story. I looked at the cats, those innocent, blinking eyes, and felt sick. They were being used too, living props in someone else's private experiment. That was it. I was done. I decided I'd take the cats to a local shelter, make an anonymous call to the police, and get as far from that mansion as I could. The money didn't matter anymore. Nothing did. I started packing slowly, carefully. I knew every move was being watched. Before I left the library, I ran my hands along the massive antique desk where I'd sat the night before. It was spotless, heavy, beautiful, and it felt wrong. Something metallic brushed my fingertips underneath the center drawer. I reached up and pulled gently. Black electrical tape. Beneath it, a tiny parabolic microphone, perfectly aimed upward, right where a person's mouth would be if they were sitting there. It wasn't part of the house's main security system. This was something else. Custom, professional, expensive. I ripped it off, and as the tape peeled back, I froze. There was something carved into the underside of the desk, rough handwriting, scratched deep into the wood. "We heard your little thought, Evan. You should have stayed." I dropped the mic. My vision tunneled. They had heard everything. Every muttered word, every whispered plan, even my internal debates about leaving. The message wasn't from the past. It was new. Someone had carved it there after hearing my thoughts of escape. I didn't think. I ran. I threw my stuff into the car, the cats howling in their carriers. Not checking mirrors, not looking back. I just drove. 6 hours straight, until the city lights were nothing but smudges in the rearview mirror. At a rest stop, off the highway, I found a payphone and called the police. I didn't give my name. I just told them to check the Albright house, that there were hidden cameras in the cat condo and microphones under the furniture. Then I hung up and drove again. Days later, I checked local news archives. There was only a single line in the police blotter. "Suspicious activity, call at private residence. No signs of forced entry. Residents unavailable for comment." The Albrights had vanished. No charges, no evidence, nothing. I kept the cats, brought them to my parents' house. At least something innocent came out of that nightmare. It's been years, and I've rebuilt my life in small, quiet ways. No more tech jobs, no smart devices, no cameras. I live in a small apartment where every vent, every outlet, every corner has been checked a dozen times. But some habits don't fade. Every night before bed, I sweep the room with the radio detector. I tape over every LED light. I unplug everything that hums. Because once you know how it feels to be watched without permission, you can never unfeel it. And sometimes, when the night is dead silent, I swear I can still hear the faint click of a lens adjusting. Like something, somewhere, is trying to focus. I tell myself it's paranoia, that it's all in my head. But then I'll walk past a mirror, and for just a second, I'll hear a whisper. A whisper that sounds like a man's voice. Too close, too clear. "We heard your little thought, Evan." And I can't help but think, maybe I never really left that house. Maybe I've just been in another room of it this whole time. It was the summer of 2017. My girlfriend Chloe and I needed a romantic weekend getaway. a break from our hectic city lives. We booked a charming, rustic-looking cabin nestled deep in the Catskill Mountains through an incredibly highly rated Airbnb host. I didn't realize it at the time, but the charming, rustic atmosphere was just a cover, and the host's perfect ratings were built on the intimate, terrifying surveillance of his paying guests. The cabin, dubbed the Pine Nook, was exactly as advertised. Dark wood, a roaring fireplace, and a massive, picturesque picture window that overlooked a dense pine forest. The host, a man named Marcus, had nearly 1,000 five-star reviews. He was praised for his hospitality and his detailed written instructions, which he insisted we read upon arrival. The instructions were bound in a heavy, leather-covered manual, like an old family Bible. Most of the rules were standard. Conserve water, respect the septic tank, don't feed the wildlife. But one rule, buried deep within the section on the heating system, stood out. Due to the delicate nature of the antique wood stove, a single external temperature gauge has been installed directly over the mantelpiece. Please do not touch or attempt to tamper with the gauge, as it is directly wired to my contractor for remote diagnostics. Your cooperation is appreciated. Chloe, my overreactor and primary voice of concern, hated the rule immediately. A remote diagnostic gauge. What is this? A smart home, she griped, setting her suitcase down in the master bedroom. It's a cabin in the woods. They're just trying to be creepy tech bro hosts. Relax, it's probably a liability thing, I said, trying to be the skeptic and calm her down. A wood stove can be a fire hazard. They just want to make sure we don't crank it up too high. Marcus has 1,000 five-star reviews, Chloe. The place is perfectly safe. I walked over to the stone mantelpiece to examine the gauge. It was an old-fashioned circular thermometer, about 4 inches in diameter, set into a small, carved wooden plaque. It was mounted high up, directly in the center, overlooking the entire living room, the couch, and the dining table. It looked old and dusty, perfectly consistent with the cabin's rustic aesthetic. We spent the first evening relaxing. We cooked dinner, drank wine, and sat on the couch in front of the massive picture window, watching the moonlight filter through the pine trees. The first hint of a problem came subtly, about an hour after we had settled in. I was scrolling through the cabin's local Wi-Fi, which was a surprisingly strong, unsecured network. The name of the network was simply, and rather innocently, MARCUSPINEGUEST. But when I refreshed the list, a second network appeared, also unsecured, but with a different name. It was called Marcus View. It vanished seconds later, replaced by the original guest network. Did you see that? I asked Chloe. See what? She said, engrossed in a movie on my tablet. There was a second Wi-Fi network, Marcus View. It just popped up and then disappeared. She barely glanced up. Probably the neighbors, and they changed their mind about sharing. It's the woods, Mason. Signals are weird. I tried to dismiss it, but the name Marcus View stuck with me. A view of what? The next morning, the oddity escalated. Chloe and I were having a private, slightly heated discussion over breakfast. It was a minor argument about one of her coworkers, a completely internal, personal issue that had nothing to do with the cabin or our weekend. We were sitting at the dining table. The antique-looking temperature gauge on the mantelpiece was directly behind Chloe, overlooking the scene. About 10 minutes after the argument, a delivery truck pulled up to the cabin, a battered silver van from a local flower shop. The driver, a skinny, nervous-looking young man, dropped off a single, hand-tied bouquet of bright red roses. The card simply read, "A little something to smooth things over. M." Chloe and I stared at the card. Marcus. He was apologizing for our private argument. We hadn't contacted him. We hadn't used our phones during the argument. The discussion was entirely contained within the living room, within the view of that antique temperature gauge. The skeptic in me died a quick, sharp death. Chloe's face went white. "He heard us," she whispered, her eyes fixed on the wooden plaque above the fireplace. "He sent us flowers. He was listening to our fight." I stood up, the chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. I looked at the old, dusty thermometer, feeling a cold, intense certainty. It wasn't a temperature gauge. It was the lens and the microphone. I went straight to the mantelpiece. The gauge looked permanently affixed to the wooden plaque. I pressed on the glass face of the thermometer. It was solid. The needle inside was still, reading a comfortable 72 degrees. I grabbed a butter knife from the dining table and carefully wedged it between the wood plaque and the stone fireplace. I applied gentle pressure. A small, almost invisible seam in the wood cracked open. I pulled the entire plaque off the wall. What fell into my hands was heavy. On the back, crudely taped with masking tape, were a small, battery-powered microphone and a micro SD card recorder. The thermometer was a complete fake, merely a cover. The real camera, however, wasn't there. What was there was much worse. Behind the plaque, the stone wall of the fireplace had been cut away to accommodate a larger piece of equipment. It was a high-powered, professional-grade camera unit, complete with a thermal sensor and a small, directional dish antenna. It was recessed deep into the wall, completely hidden from sight, and it was aimed through a minuscule, barely perceptible gap in the stone mortar, perfectly trained on the couch, the dining table, and the central part of the cabin. But this wasn't the main camera. This one was aimed slightly upward, not at the seating area, but at the enormous picture window. It was a weatherproof lens, clearly designed to capture the reflection of the room in the glass. The reflection. I stepped back, horrified. When we sat on the couch and looked out at the forest, what we were really seeing was the dark, reflective surface of the enormous window glass. And every time the light was just right, that glass was reflecting a perfect, clear image of the interior of the cabin. The camera was not aimed at us directly, but at our reflection. It was a surveillance technique designed to capture everything without the lens ever needing to be near the occupants. I finally understood the vanished Wi-Fi network. Marcus View. It wasn't a view of the forest. It was a high-definition, panoramic view of his guest's intimate life, captured in the natural reflection of the glass, and broadcast on a hidden network for him to watch. We had been sitting in the dark, watching the movie on my tablet, completely oblivious. Our weekend retreat had been a fishbowl. Marcus had been watching us for hours, seeing everything, and had sent the flowers as his way of saying, "I'm here, I see everything, and you are mine until checkout." I couldn't leave yet. I was furious, violated, and needed proof that went beyond just an illegal recording device. I needed the man behind the camera. I checked the camera unit in the wall. It was hardwired into the power in the cabin's local Wi-Fi, but I couldn't simply pull the wires. It would send an instant alert. I needed to act like a normal guest. I went back to the old leather-bound rulebook. I flipped past the section on the antique wood stove and the temperature gauge. I noticed the manual wasn't a standard printed book. It was pages inserted into a custom leather cover. On the last page, the rule for checkout. Please leave all keys on the small wooden shelf by the front door before departure. I will remotely lock the door once I confirm the cabin is empty. Remote lock. That meant a smart lock system. I looked at Chloe. She was still standing in the dining room, clutching the red roses like a shield. She had gone from overreactor to calm thinker in an instant, her face set in a rigid determination. "He's probably watching us now, Mason," she said quietly. "He knows we found the plaque. He's waiting for us to panic." "Exactly," I replied. "But he doesn't know about the reflection camera yet. He thinks we only found the mic." I walked over to the picture window, making sure my body was squarely in the frame of the reflection camera. "We have to go," I whispered, loud enough for the reflection mic to pick up. "But we can't leave this evidence here. I'm taking the plaque and the mic with me. We'll leave the house in 15 minutes, drive straight to the nearest town, and call the police." I then looked at Chloe, my voice dropping lower, but still deliberate. "I'm going to wait until the lock clicks. When it clicks, we know he's confirmed we've left. We'll be safe then." The lie was designed to create a false sense of security for Marcus. He would expect us to panic, to speed away. I wanted him to think we had a plan. Flee, gather evidence, call the cops. The remote lock confirmed our exit. I didn't wait 15 minutes. We grabbed our bags and I took the plaque and the mic. I quietly replaced the fake thermometer on the mantelpiece, making the room look normal. We left the keys on the shelf and walked out, acting like two people slightly stressed but still friends. As soon as the door closed, I heard the faint metallic clunk of the smart lock engaging. He had locked us out. He thought he was in the clear. We didn't drive away. We hid the car a few hundred yards down the dirt road, behind a dense copse of pine trees. We waited. It was pitch black, and the air was cold. We sat in the car for what felt like an eternity, straining to hear any noise over the heavy beating of my own heart. Chloe was the calm thinker now. "He has to retrieve the camera," she whispered. "He can't risk the police finding that reflection unit. It's too high-tech for a simple voyeur. He's running a network." We waited another hour. Then, headlights appeared in the distance, slowly winding up the long private driveway. A black, unmarked SUV came to a stop in front of the cabin. The driver, a muscular man in his late 40s with a shaved head, not the kind, bearded Marcus in the profile picture, got out and used a separate key to open the smart lock. He didn't look around. He walked straight into the cabin. We crept out of the car, moving silently through the woods, paralleling the driveway. We reached the edge of the clearing and crouched behind a pile of stacked firewood. The front door was now open. We could see the man inside. He walked directly to the stone fireplace. He didn't even glance at the mantelpiece where I had left the fake plaque. He knew the hidden camera was elsewhere. The man reached down, under the massive, dark wooden dining table, and pulled out a small metallic panel that had been perfectly camouflaged against the dark wood. Behind the panel was a small, high-capacity hard drive unit, the central recording station. He was retrieving the main footage. He then walked toward the picture window, the heart of the reflection camera setup. But he didn't go to the wall. He reached up to the ceiling above the window frame and pulled down what looked like a thin, antique wooden beam, a decorative piece of the ceiling structure. It wasn't wood, it was an access panel. Behind it, not one, but 3 small black lenses were revealed, aimed directly at the glass of the window, forming a triple-lens panoramic feed. This was the true Marcus view, a multi-angle, high-definition recording studio of our private lives. He began disconnecting the wires. This was my chance. I couldn't let him walk away with the evidence. I sprinted toward the open door, yelling, "Police! Freeze!" The man spun around, startled. He dropped the wooden panel and the hard drive clattered to the floor. He didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't try to escape. He looked at me, a flicker of genuine annoyance crossing his face, not fear. "You shouldn't have come back, Mason," he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. "You broke the rule. You tampered with the gauge." "It's over, Marcus," I yelled, trying to sound authoritative. "We have the mic, the plaque, and we know about the reflection cams. We're calling the authorities." The man just smiled, a thin, chilling expression that didn't reach his eyes. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, black key fob. "I am not Marcus," he stated calmly. "Marcus is just the profile. And you didn't think I'd be foolish enough to rely on a remote lock, did you?" He pressed the button on the fob. A heavy, rhythmic, electronic hum started, coming from all the walls of the cabin. It wasn't the sound of an alarm. It was a deep, guttural sound, like machinery engaging. Then, from the massive picture window that overlooked the forest, the horror truly began. The glass of the window didn't shatter. It began to smoothly, mechanically, and silently slide away, receding into the stone wall. Beyond the massive, empty window frame, in the pitch-black night, was not the forest anymore. There was a flood of blinding white light, like a stadium, and beyond the light, a wall of reflective, one-way glass, behind which I could clearly see a row of silhouetted figures, people sitting in chairs, watching us. The entire back wall of the cabin was a removable stage curtain. The pine forest was a scrim, and the reflection window was simply the front row of a terrifying, private audience. The hum was the sound of the stage opening. I froze, utterly paralyzed, staring at the sudden, horrifying reality of the audience. Chloe let out a choked scream. The man, the contractor, didn't move, still holding the key fob. "The 5-star reviews, Mason," he said, his voice now amplified by the open space. "They're not for the amenities. They're from the viewers." The figures behind the glass didn't move. They were just watching. We weren't guests. We were performers in a highly rated, long-running horror show, and our intimate argument and subsequent paranoia had been the final, dramatic act that earned them their stars. I didn't try to fight. The shock of being seen, not just by a camera, but by a live, paying audience, broke me. I grabbed Chloe's arm. "Run!" We didn't look back at the man, or the silent figures behind the glass. We ran out the door, back into the woods, fueled by pure adrenaline and the desperate, crushing shame of our violation. We reached the car, got in, and I floored the accelerator, not stopping until we reached a busy public gas station miles away. We went to the state troopers. We showed them the mic, the plaque, and we recounted the terrifying reveal. They took our report, but by the time they sent a unit back to the cabin, it was gone. The window was back in place, the smart lock was reset, and the property was empty. The host, Marcus, had simply canceled the Airbnb listing. A week later, all the positive reviews were wiped, and the profile vanished. We survived, but the psychological toll was permanent. Chloe and I broke up within a month, unable to look at each other without seeing the reflection in that glass, the silent audience watching our most private moments. I'm the calm thinker now. I've learned to mask my reactions, to keep my thoughts smooth, and my breathing even. To this day, I can't look at a large window, especially at night, without checking the ceiling line for a decorative wooden beam. I never use Airbnb. And every time I walk into an empty room, I look for the most innocent piece of decor, a temperature gauge, a cat condo, a desk clock, because I know that true horror isn't the monster you see. It's the one you realize has been watching you, rating your performance, and waiting for the right moment to open the curtain.